Welcome back to Sirens Cove. And welcome back to a brand new video of Pirates Coast or Cilento Coast, whatever you want to remember it as. Yeah, I guess it took a little bit longer, so welcome back, guys. I know that I said I was going to have probably 2 episodes in May, but that didn't really work out, and now it's the end of June. So thank you for still sticking by and keeping up with me if anyone's watching this. If anyone's out there. Anyway, so let's get right into the video without any more introduction. From the last episode, you remember I started working on the tavern. Well, this episode, I actually finished that entire tavern. Part of that tavern is going to be the exit of the Pirates of the Mediterranean ride, but it's also going to be a tavern / lounge for guests to just be able to hang out. There's also going to be the entrance to the captain's quarters, which is going to be another lounge restaurant very similar to the Blue Bayou that exists at Disneyland. That was one of the things that I wanted to add to Pirates of the Mediterranean that I wasn't able to in the old version of the park. When I had Sunken Gardens, I just didn't really have the space. There really wasn't a good way to kind of incorporate it. Having this extra space and dedicated land for Cilento Coast allowed me to be able to add that restaurant. I added a fireplace and a bar for beverages. I added a lot more detail because I actually finally did some research to find out some restaurant designs. I know that we talked about in the Bayou how I didn't really have a lot. For the Chateau Magnolia, this tavern is called Smugglers Rum. It was inspired by one of my friends. We were kind of thinking of some names and deciding on what the tavern should be called, and Smugglers Rum ended up being kind of the name that we stuck with. There was a few different names that we went through that we were really proud of, but Smugglers Rum ended up being the one that kind of stuck. Not to be confused with Smugglers Run. No association with that. It's a unique and original concept. After I finished the interior, which was inspired by a lot of like pirate taverns or old Caribbean type taverns, I decided to work on the exterior. This was a blend of some Mediterranean and then some Caribbean architecture style, and I did mix in different styles and just stuff to make it look a little bit more unique and make every building kind of stick out a little bit more. Another thing that I had to do was the landscaping in the background that kind of blends the Cilento Coast with the other side being Amalfi Coast, also hiding that monorail station. So I made an extension of the Pirates of the Mediterranean ride with that fortress style. I made it as like another level of the fortress to hide the station for the monorail. You'll still see the monorail at times pass by. It is still a theme park at the end of the day. I can't work miracles all the time. Moving on to the Pirates of the Mediterranean ride, I actually finally started working on the interior of the ride. At first, my original idea was to have kind of a bayou like how on Pirates of the Caribbean there is the Blue Bayou, but I decided let me just make it a little bit more unique and kind of Italy inspired. So I made a small diorama of what Cilento Coast looks like. I thought it looked really cool. I used some forced perspective. It's not the greatest, my bad. I'm not perfect. I'm also limited to what I can do because on one of the sides you'll see that the trees and everything is kind of at a larger scale, but in the distance that Cilento Coast is supposed to look further, even though it literally is probably just like 6 feet away from the ride. But I did downscale things. I added some barrels and some boxes in the water, and as it gets closer to that coast they kind of shrink and get smaller to make it look like it's further in the distance. Then I also worked on the actual queue for the ride. I wanted this to be inspired by the fortresses in the Walt Disney World Pirates of the Caribbean. So when you enter, you are going through this fortress where it has like the jail cells and it has the TNT. I also added a parrot that's there at the entrance too. I'm gonna imagine that when you enter the ride, it greets you very similar to the parrot that exists on Disneyland's Pirates of the Caribbean. Obviously in this game you can't really add audio anymore, but we're just gonna use our imagination, guys. Then you may have seen me start working on the captain's quarters. This is that Blue Bayou inspired restaurant, and what I mean by Blue Bayou, by people who don't know, when you go to Disneyland there is this restaurant that is essentially inside the ride of Pirates of the Caribbean, where it's going through this bayou scene. So there's like tables and it's candlelit and it's supposed to look like it's in the south, like you're in the bayou. Obviously my version is supposed to look like you're inside a captain's quarters cave where you see like the boats going by, plus more of like a a lounge, more of like a chill restaurant than the tavern that's upstairs. This one's supposed to be a little bit quieter, more upscale dining versus the tavern upstairs being more for quick serve and grab and go, because there's probably a lot of foot traffic going on there where it's going to be really loud. Can't really get a lot of conversations in. Upon adding more details to the queue and then to the exit for the Pirates of the Mediterranean ride, I also worked on the entrance for the Cilento Coast, which again was inspired by the fortress style to kind of set the tone, because just a few feet away from it is the entrance to Ghostly Peaks. So I didn't want to make it a little bit different, and I did have them at like a staggered angle where even though you're in Ghostly Peaks, you cannot see the entrance or into Cilento Coast, and vice versa. As you're inside Cilento Coast, you cannot see into Ghostly Peaks, even though they do share references with Sunken Gardens, which is kind of cute because they used to share one land. The Haunted Villa and Pirates of the Mediterranean used to be part of Sunken Gardens here at my park. Eventually, the Haunted Villa got its own land with Ghostly Peaks. Now, Pirates of the Mediterranean is getting its own land with Cilento Coast. Once I had finished the gate, I also worked a little bit more on the courtyard. As you saw, I created a statue. Well, actually, I didn't create a statue. I created the fountain, but the statue I did download from the workshop. This one's kind of like a Jack Sparrow inspired character. I made it look more like a statue by changing it to marble. Ooh, this thing is tight. Anyway, as we move back to the Pirates of the Mediterranean ride, I worked on the first drop that happens right after you see the Cilento Coast diorama. As you fall, you'll see that there's these red neon. It's supposed to kind of just give you like that effect, very similar to what I used in Destination Space, inspired by Space Mountain, with the light adds a little bit more intensity. Obviously in the game, if it's a pitch black scene, you cannot see anything, so you cannot really feel that you're dropping. So this is a way to add a visual into the game to give more depth and more feeling of the actual ride. The next scene that you go through is the scene where the ship and like the fortress are fighting. The next scene after that is spoils of war, I guess. So you see a lot of skeletons from previous pirates and guardsmen or whatever that have passed away. As you're going through it, you see that there's this cave with this skull-shaped cave, which leads you into that cave that has the lightning, and then it has that second drop, which leads you to the treasure. And then as you quickly pass the treasure, I did add a new section. This is replacing the old pirate ship section. It looked really dated, but what I did is I decided to make it kind of like the Sirens Cove, inspired to what Mermaid Adventure is going to be. Obviously Mermaid Adventure is a lot more lighthearted. It's going to be more of like a family type ride. The sirens in this one are not very nice. They're kind of luring you to your death. As you see that beautiful scene, which has a lot of flowers, and I used two mermaids, one inspired by the animated Little Mermaid, and then the other one inspired by the live action Little Mermaid. What? You go into the cave. I added more lighting and kind of fixed up the lighting that was coming over from Neon Vortex Tron inspired ride, which was making it look a little bit more pink. I fixed that. It still has a pink undertone, but I did try to make it look a little bit more spookier. And after that, you do go into yet another island scene. I kind of changed it from what the previous version was, which had a treasure chest and then the pirate. This one I try to make it look a little bit more ominous with skulls on top of spikes. As you go through that, you go through the jail cell, then comes the third big drop, which is going to be the one that takes you into the Burning Village. And this episode, I finally finished working on the Burning Village. I added more buildings to add more depth, and I added some lights to kind of bring life to it in addition to more flames. This is the one scene where I finally did add that Captain Jack Sparrow. I do want to add more characters. That might be done off camera. Once you're through that Burning Village, you do go into a cave. This is not really that special, not very inspired, even though I did have some ideas. Again, I'm limited to what I can do in here. There is a cave on the Disneyland ride that you do go through, and that does have more pirates and more treasure. So in this one, I just made it look kind of like a crystal cave that had more like a gold color to it. And you go through one more section that has like a throne before you ascend and kind of end up back in that Cilento Coast inspired bayou. And that does take you to the exit of the ride. That kind of finishes up the entire ride. The ending, it's not exactly what I had imagined, and I did do some work off camera, which I didn't include in this video. That's kind of a quick episode 2. A lot of building, a lot of just finishing finishing up the Pirates of the Mediterranean ride. I'm really excited to do the tour video. I'm gonna save that for the last video. See, I really did like the one that I did for Bayou Falls, and I hope that you guys like that too. I'll see you guys on the next episode, hopefully July. I want to get Mermaid Adventure finished before August, because August is going to be that 4-year anniversary for my park, and I do have some special stuff planned to post for the 4-year anniversary. Look out for that content, and again, thank you for being so patient with my posting schedule. I try to post once a month, as it's a little bit difficult because I'm working on pretty big projects. I also do have a life outside of here. What? Would have thought? I can't wait to see you guys on episode 3. Bye-bye.